Marjorie Henderson liked to think of herself as an easygoing person. She took life in stride, never got too worked up about small mishaps, and treated her furniture with as much love as she did her cat, Tinkerbell. The only exception to her daily placidity was plants. She believed in the power of greenery, but she had never successfully maintained one without seeing its leaves drop, turn brown, and eventually wither away. So it was with considerable effort and a vague sense of pride that she had kept one particular houseplant alive for over a year. The plant, currently stationed on a vintage stool in the sunniest corner of the living room, was a Dracena with thin, variegated leaves. She called it Leafy. Leafy had started off like all her other plants, small, delicate, and full of promise. Against the odds, Leafy thrived. Its stem thickened, its leaves multiplied, and it became a lush green miracle in Marjorie's otherwise questionable horticultural track record. One perfectly ordinary Tuesday, after she finished her morning coffee, she noticed a peculiar phenomenon. Leafy seemed taller. Marjorie shrugged. Plants grow after all, so who was she to complain? By Wednesday, Leafy appeared to have sprouted two thick, twig-like offshoots near the base. Marjorie crouched beside the pot, gingerly touching what looked suspiciously like ankles. "Huh," she said to the silent living room walls. "That's new." She got up, feeling that swirling combination of curiosity and dread, but decided that who was she to question a bit of unusual botanical growth? By Thursday, Leafy's trunk had elongated further, and the offshoots developed more definition, resembling, were those knees? Marjorie could hardly believe it, but she found herself engrossed in the process. She ran her fingers over the bark-like texture. A strange impulse told her to give the woody surface a gentle, encouraging pat. Perhaps this was some hidden trick of the species, maybe advanced multi-limbed growth or something so rare that it was uncharted territory for horticultural handbooks. She searched online for houseplant growing suspected legs, and her results were no help mostly. Jokes on novelty garden gnomes. Clearly, Leafy was a class of its own. After a couple of days, Marjorie woke up to discover that her beloved Dracena was no longer in its usual corner. At least it was not where she remembered it. The pot was on its side, as though something had attempted an ungraceful breakout. Traces of potting soil were scattered across the hardwood floor, leading to the hallway. That was how she found Leafy, crouched next to the laundry hamper, tall and proud, and looming over the socks like a watchful sentinel. Two distinctly leg-shaped trunks balanced the leaves and pot precariously. She screamed. Hand over her mouth, she took a swift step back. Tinkerbell, disturbed from a nap, fled the laundry scene with an indignant yowl. For a long moment, Marjorie and Leafy faced each other in the hallway. The plant didn't move, its new limbs locked into position. Perhaps it was as startled as she was. "Leafy?" she whispered, feeling ridiculous for addressing a plant. "Did you walk here?" The plant did not answer, but the sight of more soil sprinkled along the floor told her that yes, Leafy had indeed traveled from point A to point B in search of what exactly? She carefully herded the plant back to the living room, following the trail of spilled soil. She righted the upended pot and tried to ease Leafy's roots back into a stable position. The newly emerged limbs were sturdy enough to stand, so the plant's posture now depended on how it distributed its weight. It was messy, definitely unconventional, but somehow Marjorie managed to get Leafy balanced in a corner again, albeit with a protective tarp beneath it so it wouldn't ruin the floorboards. She was just tidying up the roving plant's footprints of dirt when she heard another rustle, a kind of vegetative shuffle coming from behind her. Leafy had taken a step. She stared, mouth open, dropping the dustpan with a dull clang. Pressing her hand to her chest, she took a calming breath. "This is just a weird dream, right?" "I'll go with that," she whispered to herself. But even in her wildest dreams, she hadn't conjured a leafy green plant sporting legs of bark and roots. So she decided to adapt to accept Leafy's new mobility. Holding out a hand as if coaxing a shy puppy, she said, "Leafy, come here." In response, or possibly coincidence, Leafy inched a leg forward. The top leaves waved in a slight shimmy as though the plant was thinking, "All right, I guess we'll try this." Marjorie nearly squealed with excitement. For a moment, she forgot her surprise or fear. This was fascinating. She had a walking houseplant. If she could avoid publicity or the meddling of curious neighbors, maybe they'd figure out a comfortable living arrangement that involved minimal tracking of dirt. That evening, Marjorie sat on her couch, flipping through a gardening manual on dracaenas, half hoping to see a section advising, if your dracaena grows legs and tries to do laundry, consult your local greenhouse. Certainly no such section existed. Meanwhile, Leafy stood proudly near the television, perhaps absorbing the hum of nightly news anchors. Under typical circumstances, plants using photosynthesis prefer sunlight, but maybe this one also liked cable. 2 days later, Marjorie came home from grocery shopping and found the living room in complete disarray. Floor splotched with water, a broom lying helplessly in the center of the rug, and her collection of ceramic mugs knocked askew in the drying rack. In the midst of it all was Leafy, wiggling. She realized, with a mixture of dismay and awe, that the plant had attempted to do chores. The water on the floor indicated that Leafy might have tried to mop. Also, the broom on the rug hinted that Leafy undertook a heroic, if misguided, attempt at sweeping. Ceramic mugs in the drying rack might have been jostled as the plant stretched for the broom. Tinkerbell was perched safely on top of the bookshelf, glaring with wide green-yellow eyes, probably wanting no part in the fiasco. Marjorie collapsed into laughter. "Leafy," she announced between giggles, "did you try to clean the living room?" The plant wobbled from side to side. It was subtle, but it was enough for Marjorie to suspect it was indeed some kind of nod. The comedic absurdity made her grin from ear to ear. She marched across the puddle, grabbed a towel, and began wiping up. Leafy shuffled in her direction, apparently offering assistance. "No, no," Marjorie said gently. "I appreciate the effort, but let's leave the chores to me. Just keep working on that whole miraculous walking thing." But Leafy, whether out of unstoppable diligence or an innate desire to be helpful, simply couldn't stand by while there was work to be done. Early Saturday morning, far too early, in Marjorie's opinion, she was awakened by the clamor of metal against wood. She rushed to the kitchen with her heart pounding. Leafy was standing by the sink, leaning precariously forward on its leg-like trunks, a spatula in one of its upper leaves. On the stove, a pan sizzled with half-cooked eggs. Tinkerbell skittered around the kitchen island, meowing as though to say, "I have no idea what it's doing, but you'd better handle this, human." Hissing from the sizzling eggs offered a comedic, if precarious, backdrop. Marjorie turned off the stove before the scrambled eggs could become scorched lumps. Leafy still held onto the spatula, waving it gently. This sight was so ridiculous that any initial panic dissolved into unrestrained laughter. "You're trying to cook breakfast now, are you?" she teased the plant, tapping its clay pot gently. She sniffed the eggs. "Well, I guess they're not burnt, so good effort. But might I suggest you stick to watering yourself for now?" Leafy's leaves drooped slightly, as though disappointed in its own cooking. Marjorie gave the pot a reassuring pat. "Don't worry, I appreciate the gesture." Word spread about Leafy more quickly than Marjorie would have liked, mostly because her best friend, Alicia, had an uncanny sense of timing and a limited filter for what might be considered normal conversation topics. Alicia dropped by one afternoon to pick up a sweater she had left behind. She stopped in her tracks in the living room, wide-eyed at the sight of Leafy strolling across the carpet with a microfiber cloth in one leaf, gently dusting the bookshelf. "Oh, my goodness," Alicia said, her jaw practically hitting the floor. Am I seeing, Marjorie? Is your houseplant dusting your bookshelf?" Leafy froze at the unexpected visitor. Like a child caught rummaging through the cookie jar, a couple of leaves trembled. Then it scurried back a few steps. Obviously, Leafy wasn't used to guests. Marjorie tried to stammer out her explanation. "You see, a few days ago, it, sprouted legs. Then it started tidying up the house. I have no idea how or why, but you know me. I'm not about to question a free cleaning service." Alicia let out a giddy squeal. "This is wild! You're sitting on a viral news story, girl." She whipped out her phone, camera at the ready. In a minor panic, Marjorie grasped Alicia's arm. "No, don't film it. I want to keep it quiet. Who knows what would happen if word got out that we have a self-sufficient ambulatory houseplant? Lab tests? Media chaos? No, I prefer my life calm. Reluctantly, Elysia lowered the phone. She looked at Leafy again, who had inched forward, brandishing the microfiber cloth in what looked like a timid wave. Elysia chuckled. Okay, fine. I won't post it online, but I've got to at least tell my sister. She's terrible at keeping secrets, but she loves gossip. Wait, hold on, that might be a bad idea. She eyed Marjorie's exasperated face. All right, all right. Nature's best kept walking plant secret stays between us. Over the next few weeks, Leafy refined its chore-doing skills, albeit with some kinks. The laundry fiasco remained a big challenge, mostly because the hamper was a precarious location for a two-legged plant. One evening, Marjorie heard such a racket that she immediately dashed to the laundry room. She found the hamper turned over with clothes scattered like confetti, Leafy face first in a pile of mismatched socks, pot half detached from its legs. It was hollering in some silent houseplant language, flailing leaves in distress. Forcing back laughter, she pulled it upright, shaking her head. Leafy, if you want to help with laundry, let me teach you how to handle it safely. So began a comedic training regime. Marjorie tried to break down household chores in ways a plant could manage. Every day, she'd show Leafy the steps. First, gather the clothes, then place them in the machine, measure detergent carefully, and press the right buttons. Leafy listened, or watched at least. It mimicked her movements surprisingly well, though she had to help with the delicate tasks. She learned to let the plant handle simpler duties, grabbing t-shirts or gently transferring socks. Each time Leafy accomplished a mini task, it did a jolly little shuffle which Marjorie equated to a celebratory dance. Dusting, Leafy's initial self-appointed chore, was a consistent success. With each passing day, she found her shelves, mantels, and windowsills gleaming from the careful wiping of a houseplant that rarely missed a spot. In the realm of vacuuming, however, Leafy was less adept. Its pot clunked around the living room, dragging the vacuum cord behind it. More than once, it got tangled in the cord, nearly toppling over. One time, it accidentally vacuumed Tinkerbell's tail. The cat emitted a shriek that thundered through the house, and Leafy let go of the vacuum handle to wave its leaves frantically as if apologizing. In the end, after lots of scolding from Marjorie and loud complaining from Tinkerbell, Leafy offered the cat a small green leaf as recompense. Tinkerbell merely squinted, unimpressed, but accepted the apologies with a grudging hiss. Life with a mobile, hard-working houseplant involved constant unpredictability. Marjorie never knew what she might find upon returning home. Sometimes Leafy had reorganized the bookshelf, alphabetically it seemed, though the plant's sense of alphabetical order was subject to interpretation. Another time, Leafy erected a strange sculpture in the living room, using the vacuum extension tube, a rolling pin, and a half-dozen plastic forks. Marjorie had no idea what it was supposed to represent, but from Leafy's proud stance, she guessed it might be an artistic statement about order and utensils. She politely disassembled it. Despite the comedic chaos, there were moments of true sweetness. At the end of each day, Leafy often edged up beside the couch as she read or watched TV, and it would lightly rest its leaves against her shoulder, as though wanting companionship. She found it oddly soothing to have a silent friend at her side, a friend who diligently tried to improve her home without expecting anything in return. She discovered that if she whispered compliments, "You're doing a great job, Leafy," the houseplant would rustle with delight, as though it understood. Nature does not generally allow for houseplants to live like bipedal creatures. This truth became apparent one day when Leafy tried to clean the rain gutters. Marjorie had been planning to tackle that chore herself, but she was running late for work. Leafy, noticing her fluster, must have resolved to be helpful. While she was at work, the houseplant apparently ventured outside for the first time. It worked its way around the side of the house, presumably trying to climb the short ladder propped against the gutters. She came home to find Leafy lying in a patch of flowers, pot cracked, soil scattered, leaves drooping from an Marjorie gasped and dropped her bag on the driveway. "Leafy!" she cried, rushing to the plant's side. It was battered, some leaves bent, roots partially exposed where the pot had shattered. Panicked, she scooped up the pieces of clay and tried to reassemble them around the root ball. You silly beanpole. Why did you try to do that by yourself? She fought tears as she realized the extent of the damage. Leafy rustled feebly. For a moment, she thought all was lost. Then, remembering that hardware stores sold replacement pots, she pulled herself together. She mustered her courage, carefully carried Leafy inside, and set it on the kitchen floor. Tinker Bell circled, keeping a respectful distance, as if sensing the gravity of the situation. Next, Marjorie rummaged for supplies: a bigger pot, fresh nutrient-rich soil, a trowel, and some supportive stakes. Through the evening, she labored to repot Leafy, supporting its trunk and battered limbs. She gently wiped the dirt from its leaves and coaxed it to remain calm with quiet, reassuring whispers. "This might hurt a bit, buddy," she said, pressing soil around the exposed roots. "But you'll be okay. You just have to heal, all right?" Leafy quivered gently, but allowed her to reestablish its foundation. Once the new pot was carefully sealed and Leafy was upright, Marjorie leaned forward, arms around the plant's trunk, as though giving it a hug possible only for a walking houseplant that had become a friend. "I'm sorry I wasn't here to stop you," she whispered. The recovery period was rife with uncertainty. For a week, Leafy hardly moved. Its new pot was heavier, meant to provide stability. Marjorie placed it near the window so it could bathe in the morning light. Tinker Bell, usually aloof, settled nearby on the couch arm. The cat kept a close watch, tail flicking as though worried about the plant's health. At day's end, Marjorie would pull up a footstool, set down a watering can and a gentle fertilizer solution, and speak softly about her day, hoping the familiar sound might cheer Leafy up. Over time, its wilted leaves began to perk up again, each day regaining a bit more color. The battered trunk slowly regained its previous upright posture. When Leafy did finally shift in its pot, it was a small movement, one limb-like trunk stretching an inch or two to reposition itself. Marjorie nearly jumped for joy. "You're going to be okay," she declared, giving the pot a gentle pat. Leafy made a quiet rustling, as though letting out a contented sigh. It tried to stand, but the weight of the new pot was too much. Marjorie steadied it. "Easy now, no more gutter cleaning stunts, you hear?" She joked about it, but deep down she felt relief washing over her. She realized how attached she had grown to this bizarre phenomenon of a houseplant. In some ways, Leafy's surprising mobility had been one of the best things to happen to her in a long while. It brought laughter, warmth, and companionship into her otherwise quiet house. Of course, it also brought the occasional fiasco, but that was par for the course in any relationship, human or apparently plant. In the following weeks, Leafy's diligence to help returned, but more moderately. It recognized its physical limitations. Tasks like dusting at ground level were now fairly straightforward, but no more precarious attempts at climbing ladders. Tinker Bell was more at ease, too, perhaps assured that the vacuum fiasco would not be repeated anytime soon. One morning, Marjorie attempted to wash the floors, only to discover that Leafy had beaten her to the punch. Armed with a spray bottle in one cluster of leaves, a rag in another, the plant was methodically cleaning a corner tile. She stifled a chuckle as she watched from the doorway. Slowly but surely, Leafy worked its way across the floor, leaving a gleaming path behind. When it finished, it turned, noticing her presence, and raised the spray bottle as if to say, "Got it covered." "Well done," Marjorie applauded, stepping carefully to avoid slipping on the damp tiles. "Such a superstar, but be careful not to use too much water. Don't flood us out." The plant nodded or the leaves bobbed, affirming its understanding. Each night, Leafy would return to its designated corner, pot settled in the patch of warm lamplight that replaced the sun. Marjorie would read or watch a sitcom, occasionally glancing over just to confirm it was real, the houseplant with the soul of a butler living in her living room. Indeed, it was real, and it brought a sense of amusement, some calm. She wondered if it was lonely. But Leafy never seemed lonely. It had a caretaker in Marjorie, an annoyed friend in Tinker Bell, and apparently the entire house as its plague. Alicia visited periodically, always marveling at Leafy's progress and joking about super plant expansions. She once joked they should start a cleaning service. Leafy and Maj at your service. We spring clean like you've never seen. Marjorie could picture it in a whimsical, cartoonish advertisement. But she always answered the same. No cameras, no press, let's keep Leafy safe. Thus the days turned into a routine of quiet domestic harmony. Marjorie Tinkerbell and the helpful houseplant that once nearly broke itself, cleaning gutters and occasionally battered the cat's tail with the vacuum. As autumn rolled in, so did earlier sunsets. Leafy adjusted to the change in daylight, pressing closer to the window, soaking up every bit of sun. One crisp evening, Marjorie flicked on the heater and set out to tidy the living room. She found Leafy already dusting the mantel. Together they cleaned up. She couldn't help but grin. It was no longer freakish or alarming, it was just life in a home with an eager plant that had discovered the pure joy of helping. On a drizzly Saturday, as she prepared tea, Leafy marched up with a cloth and a glass spray bottle, tapping gently on the kitchen cupboard as if requesting to refill. She laughed, carefully refilled the bottle with water and vinegar, and let it continue its cleaning spree. She savored a sip of her tea leaning against the counter, a wave of contentment washing over her. She realized that what had initially been a bizarre phenomenon had become precious to her. Leafy was no mere plant. It was an oddball companion who shared space, chores, and moments of quiet triumph. She recalled how anxious she'd been, seeing Leafy splayed out in the flower bed, unsure if it would survive. That moment made her see, more than ever, how much she cared about this strange green friend. Despite her initial shock at Leafy's mobility, she now couldn't imagine life without the gentle, shuffling steps on the floor, the comedic mishaps, the random attempts to master cooking. Even Tinkerbell seemed to have gotten used to Leafy, occasionally curling up on the windowsill to watch the plant roam. Certain nights, she'd catch Leafy standing by the living room window, leaves lifted against the glass, as if peering out at the streetlights glowing in the distance. She liked to imagine Leafy had ambitions, maybe a desire for exploration, or a longing for a bigger greenhouse. But for now, the plant seemed content to remain by her side, living a life of domestic chores and small, heartwarming gestures, not requiring anything but a steady supply of water, occasional sunlight, and the chance to be useful. And so, the house was, improbably, cleaner than it had ever been. Marjorie found more time to read, to draw, to bake cookies. Leafy sometimes hovered by her elbow as she measured ingredients, presumably to see if its cooking luck had improved since the scrambled eggs fiasco. She'd let it hold a wooden spoon occasionally, praising it. "That's it, Leafy, slow and steady." Of course, she did the stove work herself, not trusting a flora and wood structure anywhere near open flames. Leafy appeared to understand and seemed content to assist from the sidelines. On one particularly sunny afternoon, Marjorie propelled her vacuum around while Leafy dusted the coffee table. She paused mid-measure, noticing how easy this was. Two partners sharing the chores. A grin spread across her face as she realized she was deriving genuine joy from cleaning. She whispered thank you to Leafy, who paused with its duster and gave her a reassuring little nod. It was strange how quickly the extraordinary became ordinary, how swiftly a walking, helping plant could weave itself into daily life. But it had, and with that anxious question of how, answered by a shrug, the deeper question, why do I love it so much, was clearer, because it made her days brighter. There was something simple and sweet about an entity that tried its best, asked for nothing but water and kindness, and greeted each day with unwavering dedication to making her life a bit easier. As evening fell, Marjorie rested on the couch, Tinkerbell kneading the pillow next to her. Leafy finished dusting the last shelf, carefully set the cloth aside, and strolled to its corner near the window. She clicked off the table lamp, letting only the soft flicker of a candle remain. Outside, the wind rustled fallen leaves. Inside, a single leaf rustled from Leafy as if in response. Marjorie gazed around the house, tidy and warm, lightly scented with the hint of waxing polish, a few candles, and the lingering aroma of dinner. She closed her eyes, thinking back to that morning not so long ago when she'd first found Leafy in the hallway, hamper, raided. Life had changed so drastically, but in such a delightful way. A gentle rustle disrupted her reverie. Leafy had wandered closer, pot swaying slightly, leaves raised as though seeking a comforting pat. She looped an arm around the trunk, giving the plant a sideways hug. Tinker Bell yawned from her perch. Marjorie felt her heart swell. Quietly she murmured, "Good night, my walking greenery," sprinkling a few drops of water from the watering can into Leafy's soil. Then she set it aside, letting out a slow breath. She had no idea if Leafy understood every word or nuance, but after all their shared moments, she felt sure it understood enough. They were companions now, diligent caretaker and helpful houseplant, forging a bond that was as unexpected as it was extraordinary. She smiled, resting her head against the couch. Leafy's leaves gave one last soft shuffle before it too settled into stillness. And in that fleeting silence, Marjorie knew everything was right where it should be, at least until the next comedic fiasco. But that, she decided with a smirk tugging at her lips, was all part of the adventure.